lovelies, my name is Lekka, and today we're going to be going over how Yu-Gi-Oh works, what Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duels is, and how old Yu-Gi-Oh has changed versus new Yu-Gi-Oh. So if you are a beginner player and you haven't played in the past 10 years, or you haven't played since the original Season 1 anime, or if you're completely new to Yu-Gi-Oh in general and you've never touched anything in Master Duels as your first exposure to Yu-Gi-Oh in general, then stick around because this video is going to be for you. So let's start off with the very basics. What is Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duels? Obviously, Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duels is the newest game that Konami has released that is the owner of Yu-Gi-Oh for a TCG or trading card game called Yu-Gi-Oh. And what you do is you build a deck that can have anywhere between 40 and 60 cards, and you use them to go up against other people, whether in the solo gates, which is the solo mode for the game, or most commonly in ranked against other live players from all over the world. This game is 100% free to download. You can play it on Steam on your PC, you can play it on Xbox, on PlayStation, on the Nintendo Switch, on Apple, and on Android, so it's very easily accessible regardless of what platforms you have. In order to get more card packs in this game, since cards are the equivalent of currency in this one, you have gems, which is what you use to buy more packs in the store. You get a fuck ton of gems at the beginning of the game when you're going through the solo gates. You also get gems by playing in ranked duels. You can also buy gems if you want to, but you do not have to. So I do not consider this game pay to win, simply because you do not have to in order to get enough gems to make one or two really good decks and then use those in dueling. For those of you who are familiar with the game but haven't touched it in 10 plus years, since this is, I did Duel Links a little bit when it was out on mobile but didn't do very much, and this is my first real exposure back into the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG world since the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh, or Yu-Gi-Oh GX with Jaden. But if you're like me, and now there's been 10 bajillion other things because there's so many different kinds of summonings, then stick on, because these are the differences between old Yu-Gi-Oh versus the new Yu-Gi-Oh that we're playing with now in Master Duels. So with old Yu-Gi-Oh, the pacing was really slow. The biggest way that you got monsters or anything out on the field was with tribute summoning, which was the very basic form of you put down a monster that is 4 stars or less. That's your basic bitch tier 1 kind of card. And you could use one of those as a tribute for a 5 or 6 star monster, which is a tier 1 card, so you tribute one monster in order to pay for it. Or if you had 2 cards on the field, you could get rid of 2 cards in order to summon a tier 2 card, which is 7 or 8 stars. So you can use those to tribute summon, boom, put them out there, and that's essentially what you would attack with, and it was very much just who had a slightly stronger monster that you just beat each other down with. In addition to that, with old Yu-Gi-Oh, you kind of probably remember that there were a lot of cards you had to play at once. You had to do a polymerization, and you had to do a Monster Reborn, and you had to do a Swords of Revealing Light, and you had to search through your deck, and you wanted to play a card down. And so you were using anywhere from 3 to 4 cards, really, in order to get your plays out, and it was a lot slower because of the lack of resource management that the decks had when the game first started. With the way that Yu-Gi-Oh is now, it's very much the opposite of that. It's much more fast-paced. In order for the resource management to have a solution, they've made a lot of different effects with the cards that we've seen and that you're going to see in Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel that they've created, which only require 1 or 2 cards of a loss net overall after you're done with all of your combos and can draw more resources. And it's just a lot easier to get more monsters out onto the field and to use different kinds of summoning, because there's other summonings now besides tribute summoning that exist that allow you to get more monsters on the field more quickly. With old Yu-Gi-Oh, you saw a lot of tribute summoning. Maybe you would see ritual summoning as well, which is another older way that you could get monsters on the field. But with today's Yu-Gi-Oh, there's not only tribute and ritual summoning, and of course there's also fusion summoning as well, but there is Pendulum Summoning, there's XYZ Summoning, there's Synchro Summoning, there's Link Summoning, and there's Pendulum Summoning. I don't know if I already said that or not, but either way, there's all of those in addition to what you already saw with Ritual, Fusion, and Tribute. So there's a lot of different things going on in the game all at the same time, and all those strategies don't have to work together, and if you try and throw them all into the same deck, they're not going to. But it gives you a lot more options as a player in order to choose what you want to do. Additionally, with old Yu-Gi-Oh, there weren't very many cards to pick from. There were a few hundred different cards that you could kind of choose from, so the options to make decks were very limited. And now, with Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel at least, they have over 10,000 cards on this game, and they're going to be adding more because they don't even have all of their catalog of cards that they have available put into the game yet. It's just the vast majority of them as far as I know. So there's a lot more out there. Now, it can be overwhelming because of how many cards exist now that the game has been around for, 20 plus years, kind of like Pokemon, but it's nice because you also have a lot of resources, and you don't have to memorize all 10,000 plus cards. You just kind of pick something that you like, a strategy or a card style or an art style that you think is cool, and then learn that really, really well and stick with it and just kind of learn through experience. Also with old Yu-Gi-Oh, the only thing that you really had in your extra deck were the fusion monsters, right? And with the new Yu-Gi-Oh, the Link summons, Synchro summons, XYZ summons are all in your extra deck as well. If you were trying to put a fusion monster in, then that'll be in there too. But there's a lot more that goes into somebody's extra deck than there was in the original anime. Extra decks in this new meta is way more important than it ever was before in the original Yu-Gi-Oh game. Also, in the original Yu-Gi-Oh, you saw a lot of cards that were just normal monsters. So you would play them and they would do absolutely nothing other than be a beater with whatever their attack and whatever the defense was. Sometimes you would see cards with an effect, but it would have only one effect per card. So it was just a one-time, very specific use thing. In the new Yu-Gi-Oh, they've changed that significantly. There are very, very, very few normal monsters that they regularly put out. Almost everything has some kind of effect to it. And in addition to that, there's multiple effects for each card. So it's no longer one card, one effect, if it even has an effect. Now it's one card has 2, 3, sometimes even 4 effects that you can choose and pick from when you get it out onto the field. And I'm sure you all remember the meme of, "You've activated my trap card!" Well, that is still kind of a thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, with trap cards and whatnot, but there are these things now called hand traps that are very, very common and prevalent in the meta of dueling if you're going to be dueling other people and trying to climb in ranked in the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. You can still place down trap cards just like you did in the original one. There's lots of regular traps, there's counter traps, which are traps that, as the name says, counter traps when they get revealed. But there's also ones that you can play just simply from your hand that negate things. Like very common ones are Effect Veiler and Ash Blossom that you see very often in duels, which are newer cards that came out after the original Yu-Gi-Oh anime that people like to have so that they can just tech it on without it being on the field to potentially be destroyed, so they have an effect in hand that's relatively safe to use to try and break opponents' combos. Also, a lot of forbidden / limited cards that were taken out in the original Yu-Gi-Oh have completely changed now in the Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel meta. So if you guys remember that Monster Reborn and Black Hole were banned from tournament play if you were from that era a long time ago, now they have changed that and you can use Black Hole and you can use Monster Reborn. You can only use one Monster Reborn though, but you can have Black Hole in your deck and Monster Reborn if you want to. It's changed and it will continue to change as well in order for Konami to try and do what they can to keep the game as balanced as possible. So a lot of the cards that you remember not being able to be used probably can be used again now, and maybe cards that you thought you could use is no longer available, like Jar of Greed, Pot of Greed, Jar of Greed, one of the two. One of those, I think it's Pot of Greed, actually. Somebody write in the comments what it is, because I think it's Pot, I don't think it's Jar, but I don't remember. Either way, that one is banned, still. It's been banned for forever. I think that's the only one off the top of my head that I can think of that has been banned since forever. Now, let's go over all of the different kinds of ways to summon monsters in this game, because, like I said, originally it was just Tribute, Ritual, and Fusion Summoning that you could do, and now there's a lot of different ones. So if you've never played Yu-Gi-Oh before, I'm gonna go through all of them. If you've played Yu-Gi-Oh before, so you know the original 3 and you just want to hear the new ones, then feel free to skip ahead and go through the parts of this video that are relevant to you. But for now, we're going to start with Link Summoning. Link monsters. As you can see, we have Crystron Hakufibrax here. A Link monster is a blue card art background that has red arrows on it, and they have a Link rating rather than a level. So their Link rating, as you can see, the Crystron Hakufibrax is here, is Link rating 2 as a machine monster with 1500 attack. Link monsters also do not have defense points. If you look down in the bottom right, you'll see that it has 1500 attack, and where its defense normally would be, it says Link 2. That tells you that it's a Link 2 monster, so it requires 2 materials to summon onto the field. And that means that you would need 2 regular monsters / effect monsters, or another Link 2 monster to tribute in order to get Crystron out onto the field. For Link monsters, when you summon them, they have to be put in the extra zone if it is your first Link monster. They cannot go in the main card zone unless you already have a Link monster that is on the field. And these red arrows, for example, Crystron Hakufibrax has a Link rating of 2, so it has 2 red arrows, one in the bottom left and one in the bottom right of its card art. Because it has those 2 that are pointing in those directions, you can put other Link monsters where those arrows are pointing in the main monster zone. But if those arrows weren't pointing to those directions, you couldn't put any more Link monsters where there's not another red arrow pointing to. That's why Link summoning is linked because you have to link together the cards in order for them to be on the field at the same time and be played. Now, if you have two different cards that are link summoned and their arrows point to each other, like how Crystron Hexabrax has this one in the bottom right, and you had another one that you link summoned and it had an arrow pointing up to the top left, so they would be touching, that is what's called co-linking. And sometimes that has special effects depending on the card that you're playing that can give you lots of extra bonuses and crazy things and cool effects that can happen, but not all of them do. Just because two things are co-linked doesn't mean that anything super crazy will happen. It just depends on the effects of the card. You actually get a link deck when you are starting by going through the solo gates, so definitely go through the solo gates so you can learn all the different summoning methods and get a link deck for yourself so that you can practice with this too. Lastly, you don't need polymerization in order to link summon monsters. You just need to meet the requirements for the number of materials needed in order to summon them. And they also cannot be put in defense position because they don't have defense points. They don't have anything. It's not that they have 0, they have nothing, which is very, very interesting. It can only ever be in attack mode. You can also use link summoned cards like Crystron Hexabrax to summon higher up ones that I'll show you guys right now. So here I'm playing Machine Duplication on my monster because I want to summon 2 more merchants because I want to show you guys how the link summoning works. So it doesn't matter what kind of cards they are. They don't have to all be the exact 3 same cards, but all of your link summon monsters do go into your extra deck. So if I were to special summon here, you can see that I could special summon my Link 3 Mecha Phantom Beast because I have 3 different monsters that I can use to get it out here. If I only had 2, I could have summoned my Crystron Hexabrax, and then if I had summoned another monster, if I still had a normal summon or a special summon to get some other monster out onto the field, I could have used the Crystron that had a link rating of 2 to count as towards 2 of these links, and then the monster of whatever it was to count as an additional material to get the link 3 of the Mecha Phantom Beast out. So I'll just put it out here to show you guys anyway, but like I said before, can only be placed in attack position, and it can only be put in the extra zone. XYZ cards, or XYZ cards, are another form of extra deck summoning that are denoted by having a black background and use rank instead of levels. Now, when you are having a card be XYZ summoned from the extra deck, it is able to happen based on the card's rank. So with True King of All Calamities here, we can see that it has a rank of 9, and obviously it's a black background with a gold star rather than the usual thing you would see when cards have levels of an orange background with a yellow star. That's the difference between the yellow and, or the orange and black for the level and rank. But in order to get something like this out onto the field, it'll tell you its requirements. For example, here it's a 2+ level 9 monsters. So you have to have 2 or more level 9 monsters on the field, and they have to be exactly level 9. They can't be level 8, they can't be level 10, they can't be multiple different kinds of levels. They have to be exactly level 9, and there has to be 2 or more of them on the field in order for you to put True King of All Calamities, or like in this example, onto the field. In order to get the ideal conditions for the materials needed to summon the card that you're trying to XYZ summon, a lot of times you'll start with smaller ones. So instead of going for something as crazy as a rank 9, you would have rank 4 cards like Utopia that will make it pretty easy for you to just get a couple level 4 monsters out onto the field, especially with all the special summoning and bullshit that exists in Yu-Gi-Oh! And then you can pretty easily XYZ summon things from the extra deck in order to get that kind of card out onto the field. The higher the rank of the monster, the more difficult it usually is to get out. Something that's very different about XYZ summoning is that the cards do not go into the graveyard when you summon the monster. Like with link summoning or tribute summoning, when you do that, the cards that you use as materials go to the graveyard usually, or get banished depending on the card effect. With XYZ monsters, they go underneath the XYZ card and then get used as a essential second effect for the monster. Like with True King of All Calamities here, when you have those 2+ monsters, you put them underneath the XYZ card, and you can detach one material from the card. So you can detach one of those 2+ monsters that you used to summon the card in the first place and declare an attribute, and then all face-up monsters on that field become that attribute, and also all of your opponent's monsters with that attribute can no longer activate their effects or attacks. So he is a just straight up negates of anything on your opponent's field for effects and for attacking you, which is wonderful. That's why you can only have one of him, because he's so strong. But in order for his effect to activate, it's not just a normal one that happens passively once per turn. You have to have a material attached to him. So if you run out of materials, you run out of his abilities. And if you want to get more materials on them, you want to have more monsters, but sometimes you can't get materials back onto the card. And once you're out of materials, you're out. Also, because of the wording being different and these XYZ monsters are based on rank and not on level, certain cards that only do things based on level won't affect XYZ monsters. For example, Gravity Bind is one that affects monsters based on their level, and because XYZs are ranked, it won't work on them. As you can see from my field here, because I have 2 of my level 9 Karakuris on the field, I can go into my extra deck and special summon True King of All Calamities, and there's no polymerization needed as well, just like with Link Summoning. All you have to do is confirm the 2 cards that satisfy the requirements, choose what position to put it in, and what placement. Bam! True King of All Calamities comes out, boom! And you can see that right here, this 2 with this little atomic sign next to it shows how many materials is underneath the card. So we have a rank 9 with 2 material deep, King of All Calamities, whose effect I could activate if I really wanted to, by getting rid of one of these cards to detach, putting it in the graveyard. Now I only have 1 left. For this one, you just picked ability, everything changes to divine, and then you can just go big boom, smashy, smashy, and dead. Fusion summoning is one of the oldest forms of summoning in the entire games of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it is denoted by a purple card that you have to have multiple specific materials in order to summon onto the field, and you usually require something like polymerization or another kind of spell or trap card in order to allow you to fuse materials together in order to fusion summon the card that you're trying to get out on the field. The most common fusion strategies you see will be polymerization, super polymerization. There's specific cards depending on the kind of fusion materials that people will run in decks of certain archetypes that are only for that archetype, so that it's harder for players to have a specific counter to something like polymerization, because back in the day, when polymerization was the biggest way to fusion summon anything, there were a lot of counters specifically to cards like that. And now that the game has evolved so much, those cards have become obsolete, but it was a way to try and get around that kind of meta at the time. And additionally, the cards will tell you what the materials are needed on the card itself. Like for Eldritch the Mad Golden Lord, or Eldritch the Mad Lad, as I like to call him, you have to have 1 Eldritch monster and 1 level 5 or higher zombie monster, which could be another Eldritch monster, or it could just be another zombie monster that you have on the field at the time in order to fusion summon them. And also, some cards can be fusion summoned by effect alone, because the game has changed so much from the very, very beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you guys are just part of the first generation of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or are new to the game at all, you used to have a spell card in order to get this kind of monster onto the field, but nowadays there are some, like the Winged Beast monsters, who allow you to fusion summon themselves simply by card effects, and you get a fusion summoning deck that lets you fusion summon monsters like the Winged Beast deck, again, just by playing through the solo gates on the mode by yourself and going through the tutorials of all the different kinds of summoning methods there are. So if you're interested in fusion summoning with the new ways that cards can do it now much more quickly and efficiently, Link Summoning, XYZ Summoning to get the kind of materials out onto the field you need in order to fusion summoning, combining that with effect summons instead of needing a spell card in order to get fusions onto the field is really, really cool and fun to see. So if you want to play more with the older fusion summoning tactic, that's an oldie but a goodie, but spice it up with a lot of the new ways that they've refreshed it and given it a facelift, then definitely recommend playing into that solo deck that you get with the Winged Beast monsters and trying out card effect fusion summoning. Lastly, these cards are also in your extra deck and are not one in your main deck. Ritual summons are another very, very old and archaic way to get cards out onto the field that has also gotten some facelifts with the new way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has evolved over the many, many years that the game has been in existence. You'll know that they are ritual cards because they have a light blue background and they don't have arrows, unlike the darker blue red arrow surrounding the card art Link Summoning kind of motif that was going on with these ones. They're light blue, and unlike all the other ones we've talked about so far, ritual summons are in your main deck. Unlike all the other ones that are sitting in your extra deck waiting for you to summon them, these ones are within your main cards, which is both a good and a bad thing, because things that lock you out of your extra deck, like Monarch decks for example, ritual summoning cards can get around. But at the same time, because they're in your main deck, you also have to make room for them, and it means that your engine in and of itself is smaller if you don't have the spell cards or the materials needed to get the card out onto the field. So it's a little bit of a balancing act with ritual summoning. Unlike polymerization that fuses monsters together for you, you need to have a specific ritual spell in order to get a ritual monster out onto the field. So for example, with Herald of Perfection here, in order to get Herald of Perfection out onto the field, you would need something like Dawn of the Herald, which is used to ritual summon Herald of Perfection specifically. You must tribute monsters from your hand or field whose levels total exactly 6. So it can't be higher, can't be lower, it's gotta be exactly 6. You can either give out one 6 monster, level 6 monster, so you can just tribute one level 6 monster and then summon Herald of Perfection, or you could get rid of 3 level 2 monsters, you could get rid of a level 5 and a level 1 monster. However it is, it adds up to 6. It doesn't matter. The amount of materials doesn't matter with ritual summoning, it's the levels that do most. Much like with fusion summoning, it always was a little difficult to get ritual monsters out onto the field because of the amount of time and resources it would take to get this kind of card out. And with the original Yu-Gi-Oh, it was really slow. But with new Yu-Gi-Oh, much like with the fusion summoning, it's very, very fast now. You can use link summoning, you can use XYZ materials to get out the specific ones you need. Card effects are a thing, so you can... There are so many cards that exist, depending on the ones that you want to get out, that change their level depending on what you want to do. Like, if you discard a card, it becomes that card you discarded's leveled, or whatever it is. And it makes it much easier to combine card effects and different kind of spells and traps to make it very easy to get the materials you need together to ritual summon what you want to onto the field. And also one of the most annoying fucking decks in the game right now is Herald of Ultimateness, which is a ritual spell deck that uses Drighten to get it out onto the field, and it's really fucking good, but I don't like playing meta decks because I like to be different and use anti-meta decks. So this one that is here right now actually is what I'm going to be making a video and showing you guys. It's my budget semi-anti-meta Herald deck because fuck you, Herald of Ultimateness, but it's great. If you are looking to do a ritual deck, then I definitely recommend looking into the Herald Fairy decks because it's a fun way to try it out. You also get a ritual deck playing through the solo gates, again, that you can use to try out this kind of ritual summoning method as well. Synchro Summoning is another kind of extra deck summoning that is denoted by cards that have a white background, and they are based on levels in order to get them out onto the field. Unlike all the other materials that we've talked about up to this point, what makes Synchro Summoning different and unique is that you have to have something called a tuner and a non-tuner in order to get them onto the field. Non-tuners are literally any card that isn't a tuner. So any card ever that just says that it's a beast/effect monster or a reptile/normal monster or whatever. It'll just be a normal or effect monster that does not say tuner at the top of its description. Whereas a tuner monster specifically says that it's a tuner. For example, in this deck, you can see here that this level 1 card is a machine tuner effect monster, whereas if we go over to this level 2 card, we can see that it's just a machine effect monster and is not a tuner. The interesting thing about Synchro Summoning is that you can have the things add up to the number of levels in whatever way you need, as long as you have a tuner or part of its summoning material requirements met. So for this one, you need a tuner of some sort and a non-tuner machine monster, so the easiest way in this Karakuri deck, which by the way, if you want to see this really fun deck and strategy that I love using, I have a video for that already. Link is in the eye icon in the top right corner, so you can go watch that. But the best way to get it out is to use a level 7 Synchro monster that we summoned a little bit earlier, and then a level 1 tuner monster that is also a machine. So that is a 1 combined with a 7 to create an 8, so that we can get this out onto the field. And then you do the same thing to get the 9. This is now a machine synchro monster. You get another little level 1 tuner frog out, so you can then shabam summon your nice little ultra rare level 9 onto the field. Synchro is a very interesting one because of its requirement of having a tuner, a non-tuner, and its material costs met. So it could say that you need a tuner, a non-tuner machine monster, and a non-tuner monster in general. It could say that you need a specific tuner card plus a specific non-tuner card. It could say that you need 2 specific tuner cards and 1 specific non-tuner card. It just depends on the kind of synchro summoning card you're trying to get out onto the field. But as long as those materials are met, you make sure that your deck is filled with tuners and non-tuners that work together addition-wise to add up to the level of the Synchro monster you're trying to get out. It's really fun. Plus, you get a Karakuri deck through Solo Gate. Ah, we love the Solo Gate. Make sure you guys are playing solo mode in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, so you can get a lot of these decks for free, have fun with them, try out these different summoning methods, and explore them yourselves. I think Synchro Summoning is really fun. It's something that I was very new and introduced to because I hadn't touched Yu-Gi-Oh! In 10 years, and then this Karakuri deck was one that I had my partner help me with, and it's so fun, and I really, really love it. So if you are interested in trying to practice a lot of these new methods, especially for these newer ones that involve the extra deck that weren't a part of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, go through solo and take your time and explore. Are you guys ready for the weirdest fucking summoning method of all? That I still don't really understand, but want to make a deck for because I don't understand it and want to have a better understanding of it? Pendulum Summoning! Yes, that's right! Random Pendulum Summoning that allows you to have a monster that is both a monster and a spell card at the exact same time. And you heard that right. It is literally a monster and a spell. Half and half. Where, as you can see on this example here, it is a brown on top, like any normal monster, and then it's an ombre transition down to a blue on bottom that we're used to with that turquoise of a spell card. Now, Pendulum monsters can be in the main deck or the extra deck. They are weird because not only are they half monster, half spell, but they can be in either the main or the extra deck. Usually they start out in the extra deck, but when they get destroyed, they go face up into your extra deck. Even if it ends up making your extra deck over 15, that's still where they go rather than to the graveyard. Now, Pendulum monsters have two different effects. They have their Pendulum effect, which is essentially their spell effect, and then they have their monster effect, where if they were placed as a monster card, they could. So for example, their Pendulum effect, or their spell card effect, if you choose to play it in the spell trap card zone, for this one would be if you have no cards in your extra deck except for this card, you can destroy this card and then draw a card. Or, if I wanted to just play it as a straight up normal monster, it would say that it can't be normal summoned or set, and it has to be special summoned by having no cards in my extra deck except for this card. And then I can only special summon this card once per turn this way. But if I had played it as a monster, there's a lot of different Pendulum cards that have very specific kinds of summoning methods for getting other Pendulum monsters out onto the field, working with other cards in its same archetype, etc., etc. And you can only have one active at a time. It can only be a spell card or a monster card. It cannot be both simultaneously. So you can't have both your Pendulum effect and your monster effect active at the same time. You have to choose one or the other. Now, what is Pendulum Summoning? Pendulum Summoning is a very unique way of summoning monsters onto the field based on a pendulum scale, which is what the little 4 on the left and right of this card is with the blue and the red. So the pendulum scale for this one would be a 4. And if we go to a different pendulum card, you can see that they'll have other little pendulum scales here as well with different numbers. Those numbers tell you the difference between the two cards. So for example, I'll do a duel and I'll explain it to you guys and show you an example of Pendulum Summoning while I'm talking about it, because that'll be the easiest way to explain pendulum scales and then Pendulum Summoning. With a Pendulum monster, like I just did here, you'll see that there will be an option to hit P scale and you put it onto the field. It does not matter which side you put it on, but you want to have as low of a number as possible and as high of a number as possible on the scale. You want it to be as large of a scale as possible, which is why it's called a P scale or a pendulum scale. So we don't want to put two monsters that have pendulum scales of 8 onto the field because there would be a difference of 0. Ideally, we'd want to get something like a 1 out onto the field so that we have a difference of 7 in between them. The bigger the scale, the more monsters you can then pendulum summon at a time. So for example here, I'm going to use Duelist Alliance so that I can look for one with a really low, definitely this one, so that we can then play it and I can show you guys how this works. So because this one has a scale of 2, you can play it, and now boom! We have a pendulum scale here, and we can click on it, and it'll let us pendulum summon. Now, we can summon monsters that are between level 3 and level 7, because the scale is between 3 and 7, since it's 2 and 8. You might think, I thought this too, I was like, oh, so if I put a level pendulum 2 and a pendulum 8 down, that means I can summon any level 3 through, or any level 2 through 8 monsters, but it's not. Those are the cap ends. You can think of them as little aglets on your shoelaces, and the actual lace in between the aglets are what you're able to summon onto the field. So we can now summon both of these at the exact same time because of Pendulum Summoning! Woohoo! So it's a cool way to special summon multiple monsters at the exact same time in order to get a ton of materials onto the field at once. Also, like I was saying before, you can see that these ones have a specific effect when they're in the spell card zone, and they have their monster effect blacked out basically because they're not being played as a monster. Whereas these ones have their monster effect highlighted and they have their pendulum effect blacked out since you can't use the spell one when they're being treated as a monster. Pendulum Summoning has a lot of really cheeky things you can do with it. Like if this was a deck where now you're going to use these as materials to Synchro Summon a monster, you're going to use them as materials to link summon some things together. Pendulum Summoning works really well when you combine it with other newer forms of summoning that you see in Yu-Gi-Oh! That I talked about earlier in the video, just because of its ability to get a shit ton of mats onto the field at the same time. And as you guys saw this right there, boom, boom, when they got destroyed, they got sent into my extra deck zone face up, because whenever a pendulum monster dies, it doesn't go to the graveyard, it gets sent face up into your extra deck. The very, very most original OG archaic way to get cards onto the field for summoning is tribute summoning. Now, if you remember from going through all of this, the levels are the 1 through however many stars is on the card that are the orange and gold stars. For those, if it is 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars, that means that it is a basic card that can be put onto the field, and each turn when you play the game, you get 1 normal summon. So you can normal summon a 1, 2, 3, or 4 star monster onto the field when you're doing your turn. Now, if you want to get something that is 5 or 6 star onto the field, you have to tribute a basic monster. So you have to tribute a 1, 2, 3, or 4 star monster, which means you send it to the graveyard in order to get that stronger 5 or 6 card out onto the field. Similarly, if you wanted to get a 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. monster out onto the field, then you have to tribute 2 cards, and it could be 2 basic cards, so 2 cards that are 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars, or it could be a basic card and a tier 1 card, with like having 5 or 6 star, and then you happen to have a level 2 monster on the field. It just has to have 2 bodies to be used as materials in order to get that level 7 plus monster out onto the field, whereas you only need 1 material in order to get a 5 or 6 star monster out onto the field. Because you only have 1 summon per turn, whether you're going to be summoning your normal basic card, which may not survive to the next round, or if you're going to use that as a tribute for material to get something that is stronger out onto the field as a tribute summon, there's a lot of cards that let you manage your resources so you can get multiple things out at the same time. For example, there's a spell card called Double Summon that lets you have 2 in the same turn. So if you had in your hand a 1 star monster, you could normal summon that, and now since you have 2 summons that you're allowed to do per turn, you can summon that other one, and then you can tribute it to put your tribute monster onto the field. There's a lot of cards that also let you special summon, which means that you can special summon them from the graveyard or from your deck based on different spell or trap card or monster card abilities, and special summon monsters do not count towards your 1 regular tribute normal summon that you have per turn. So if you have a monster that lets you special summon itself onto the field, then you could just have that special summon monster be a material that you use for your 1 normal summon to get a tier 1 tribute card out onto the field, which is nice if you have a level 5 or 6 monster and you were able to special summon 1 material for free to use it to get it on the field. Dope. Same with if you're able to do that and special summon 2 materials to get a level 7 plus monster onto the field for your 1 normal summon per turn. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about getting the materials you need to tribute for the monster that you want without wasting that very special and very rare resource of only 1 normal summon or tribute summon per turn. So play around with that, since it's the most common and old way to get a card onto the field since Yu-Gi-Oh's ever existed, and it's Inception, not contraception. You'll find that there's a lot of very interesting and unique cards that you can do in different playstyles you can have happen in order to get what you need out onto the field for tributes. And we're done! You did it! You made it to the end of the video! If you made it to this part, please comment down below Kiwi because I like kiwis and I'm thinking about them right now because I'm kind of hungry, but also because I'm very curious to see how many of you guys made it through this video. I know it was a lot to take in. Take notes if you didn't. Go back, rewatch, rewind, whatever. Subscribe if you haven't because it's completely free and I put out a ton of resources for Yugioh Master Duel because I love this game and it's rekindled my passion for the TCG, which I haven't felt in forever. It's great to play this game and be this passionate about something again. And if you guys are really excited about it too, or if you're completely new to Yu-Gi-Oh! And this has helped you significantly, then like I said, subscribing's free. I put out a lot of content about this stuff, and you can also unsub for free at any time. Make sure that you like it, comment Kiwi down below, like I said, and keep an eye out for the next video I'm going to produce that is going to be a part of this beginner series, which is going to be a beginner-friendly deck that is using the dragon deck you choose at the beginning of this game as a few modifications of resources you get for free in solo gates to get through solo gates, because I know some of you new to the game have asked me what decks you can use to get through solo since you're having a hard time beating it down with what you have. So that's going to be what we do next. But for now, I'll stop yapping. I'll go ahead and let you guys go. I love you. Take care of yourselves. Drink water. Take your meds if you forgot to. And without taking up any more else time, I'll let you beautiful people go.